Hi, my name is Bob. This is a reading of Chapter 11, Private Label Credit Cards, from Billy-Bubba's Dumbass Texas Muffler Shop. Chapter 11. A year before I sold my last shop, I had become very involved in selling the private label credit card. We already took checks, cash, MasterCard, Visa, Discover, and American Express. I had a freestanding credit card machine, and the processing company was NPC, National Processing Company. I could swipe a card and receive authorization within a couple of seconds, and it was very, very convenient. On those occasions when the card came back declined, the customer would very often whip out another name brand card, and this one would go through. On a very few occasions, the customer would offer me a succession of cards, all coming up declined. Not to worry. I always had the upper hand and never released the car until I got full payment. If the customer tried to switch to check after, say, 3 credit cards were declined, I would be doubly wary of the check. Not to worry. I had a check verification machine also. I bought the machine from one company, and the check authorization company was another company. So many banking and money and computer and credit card companies were somehow all working together, unbelievably well run. The check reader's motor zipped through the check, asked me to type in the amount, and its LCD would output an authorization number. I wrote it on the check along with the customer's driver's license. I'm a belt and suspenders man, so instead of merely writing down the preferred driver's license number, I casually threw the license face down along with the check on my USB 5995 Canon flatbed scanner. 5 seconds later, I had lots of information, and this was never lost as an object lesson on the customer as I stapled the copy to my yellow copy of the invoice. Those checks invariably never bounced. Sometimes, however, after 3 credit cards declined, then very often the check also declined. These situations very often ended up as multiple payment invoices. $100 okayed on MasterCard, $100 on Discover, $100 on Visa, the remainder in cash, usually an odd figure, say $57.82 or whatever. This brings up the private label credit card. We offered a card run by Firestone, CFNA, Credit First National, but it said our franchise on it, not Firestone. There was a simple one-page application, and if approved on the spot, the card could be used immediately. The actual plastic card was then mailed to the customer after the first transaction. Now, although common sense tells you that after a succession of having 3 plastic cards and a personal check being turned down, that it is very, very unlikely that some private label card company like Firestone would actually approve such a risk. Not so. Apparently, all such risks were evaluated by credit rating and history of default, not current dire straits. Here's what invariably happened. It is Kafkaesque. Billy-Bubba's MasterCard, Discover, Visa, and personal check all declined, impersonally, by disembodied machine. Presumably, all 3 cards were already maxed out to the limit, and each is in arrears. Plus, he is overdrawn on his checking account. Me, if I were in such a condition, I would kill myself. At least I would not sleep. Something. But not Billy-Bubba. He is there, after all, today, in my shop, to get a vanity muffler, a loud muffler, a performance muffler, a flow master. He can justify this to his trailer wife on the basis that his, quote, internet research has shown that such a rig gets better gas mileage, that the $350 expenditure will save them money. She is not convinced. She is balancing a baby on one knee and trying to balance a checkbook on the other, brow furrowed in concentration. What about our lot note? She checks out some financial status with a cell phone and shifts the baby to light a cigarette. The dilemma is solved. Having shifted cigarette for cell phone for baby, she was required to put down the checkbook. Out of sight, out of mind. CFNA not only approves the sale, they approve a $1,200 limit. Immediately, homeboy decides to upgrade his purchase. How much more? You guessed it, $1,200. I watched this happen time and time again. This was the rule rather than the exception. However, the ballet does not end here. The terms and conditions of the new credit card are as follows. No interest at all if you pay up in full within 3 months. If you do not pay, well, it's a European medieval usurious 22%. Unconscionable? No. That is what they have to charge to cover the unrecoverable similar such bills from similar deadbeats. They leave the shop after the installation, accompanied by the thunderous, wonderful roar of the flowmaster. They are also accompanied by the $1,200 bill due exactly 3 months later. Me? I get paid that night by electronic transfer of funds from Firestone to Chase. Like clockwork, though, it played out as follows, beginning with a phone call 3 months down the road. Hey, this here's Billy-Bubba whatever. I'm that guy who got that big brake job. Now, I'm supposed to remember this transaction from, quote, that big brake job. He could at least have narrowed it down further by saying for me something like, I'm the guy who is one of your customers. That brake job you done is no good, and I want my money back. I want a refund. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, sir. Can you bring it in for us to look at? No, I just want my money back. I am authorized to give refunds, I told him, under certain conditions, but am required to at least look at the vehicle and make a physical evaluation of the situation. Now, that all sounds real reasonable and very professional, but you must realize that the wording is all spontaneous and CYA and, well, actually reasonable. The phrase, I'm authorized, is malarkey. I'm the guy who authorizes. It is my shop. I make the decisions, but it sounds like some Olympian god wrote it down in the Olympian brake shop procedure book. Physical evaluation of the situation means just that. I want to see for myself what in the heck is going on. Nobody's going to refund money on the basis of a phone call. How did I come up with this thinking, this wording, this style of fencing? Well, the franchise certainly never offered any of this kind of training. There was no such procedure book. There was a procedure book, but it never covered any real-world problems. Thinking on your feet like this comes from thousands and thousands of hours of being on the phone, of being burned time and time again, and learning from your mistakes and developing a sense of business wisdom. It's like a chess game. You have to learn to think 4 moves ahead in any direction. Moves, attacks, counterattacks, defensive positions. It's not a game to play to win, but to do the right thing, to be just, to be morally correct, but above all, not to be stupid. I just reread the above after writing it, and I noticed counterattacks. I got attacked on the counter so many times. Well, I can't just bring it in right now, but you're going to hear from my lawyer if we don't get our money. My little girl and wife was almost killed. Well, that does sound serious, sir. When did this happen? It don't make a good goddamn when it happened, but if we don't get our refund, you're going to be in some very deep shit. I understand that, sir. It sounds like we're in trouble right now, but the thing is, we got insurance and stuff, so if anyone got hurt, we haven't been contacted or anything, so maybe I can help you out. When did this happen? Bit by bit, like pulling teeth, like digging the Grand Canyon with a teaspoon, the story comes out. He had been in a collision with another car. No, there had not been any doctor bills. No one went to the hospital. Yes, he did get a ticket. When did it happen? About a week after leaving here, 3 months ago. The truck? It was totaled and is in the junkyard. It's terrible, you see, because he is, quote, upside down, still owes more on the car than it's worth. But since it's totaled, the insurance only paid him its current value, less than what he owes. Then, to add insult to injury, now comes the $1,200 bill to the credit card company. I tell him reluctantly that under such circumstances I cannot give a refund, since I cannot look at the condition of the car. He asks me if I can go with him to the junkyard. I regretfully tell him no, I cannot. I further explain that though what he relates sounds real interesting to investigate, that it would have been better if he had called 3 months ago. I do not tell him I'm making notes, nor do I tell him one of my notes to myself is, quote, ticket, arrow, police report, accident. He gets mad now and says he does not plan to pay the bill, and I tell him, yes, sir. He apparently does not realize I was paid 3 months ago. That's how credit cards work. They, quote, bought the debt from me. Now they have to collect. Of course, there are always, quote, chargebacks. These are letters from the credit card company saying they have received a complaint from the customer, saying something like he never had any work done there, that is not his signature, that someone used his card without authorization. I would then have to make a copy of the signed work order, signed invoice, signed credit card slip. If I had a prior invoice from that same guy, work done months or years earlier, any kind of work, I also would have another totally different signature on file, and if they all matched, then I had proof positive the guy was blowing smoke. Some chargebacks admitted doing the work, but complained at quality or some such similar problem. I also made copies of the same documents and wrote a nicely worded letter saying this was the first such notice of any complaint, and that I would like to address the issue with the customer, since the terms of our contract with him, stated on the invoice, guaranteed certain levels of performance. Now here's where the credit cards got interesting with me. We had been told by CFNA over and over again that their card was not intended as a form of payment of the last resort, but rather it was intended to be offered to all customers, every customer. They stated our sales would go up due to loyalty and convenience and possession of the CFNA credit card. And they were right. The other franchise shops that I belong to all bitched about it. They don't hardly approve any of them, maybe only 1 out of 10. It isn't even worth trying. I disagreed. I went down to Office Depot and bought 25 legal-sized clipboards and put CFNA credit card applications on each. The app asked for name and address and phone and zip. That same stuff was on my own work order. I used the application as a time saver. When the customer came in, I got his keys, went to get his car. While I did so, the customer filled out the credit card app. Some of them noticed it said right on it that the form was a credit card application and that they definitely did not want to apply for a credit card. I truthfully told them, no problem. It was a dual-purpose form, just scratch through where it said to sign, and that satisfied everyone. Meanwhile, we wrote down plate, VIN, mileage, etc. on another piece of paper. Now, about 3/4 of the people never complained about the credit card application, just went ahead and filled it out. There were 2 very sensitive questions on it. The form asked for driver's license number, and worse yet, the Social Security number. It cut across age lines. Anyone under 30 went ahead and just filled out all requested information, not even questioning the safety of it. Everyone over 30 absolutely refused to fill this information in, just left it blank. They knew all about identity theft, its implications, the sheer horror of it. About 50% of my customer base in Texas did not have a Social Security number because they were in the country illegally. When we evaluated the car and I worked up the total, I presented the sale and asked for the go-ahead. I just went ahead and asked, "Do you just want to sign for this today? I can send you a bill in the mail. You don't have to pay the total for 3 months and there's no interest." Usually that did it right there. They agreed, and I put in their application right there. There was a trick. CFNA had a greater tendency to approve an application when there was a sale. They always asked, "Is there a sale?" I told them yes, and then they always asked the amount. Quite often I noticed a tendency to cover the amount of the sale and always seemed to cap the limit at a higher amount than the sale amount, whatever it was. You guessed it. I told the customer his card would be sent in the mail and that his credit limit was so many dollars. I made it a moral issue never to suggest additional work to the customer under such conditions. I didn't have to. Within a few minutes he would approach me. "Hey, I saw your wall poster about this and so. How much do they cost?" This worked so well for me that my sales crept upwards. People with the card really did return quite often. Months earlier, had you done a poll and asked me as a, quote, expert business owner if such a private label credit card was a worthwhile idea, I would have scoffed at the premise. But I was wrong, and it surprised me. As an idea, it seemed to generate sales without too much effort. And it brought in return sales, too. The people at CFNA were wonderful, very professional and helpful. At every request, they helped me out. Occasionally, the phone would go out. Sometimes there would be a clerical error. They rose to the occasion every time. I was printing money. My customers began begging me for the private label credit card. My Canon scanner was smoking. I made copies of the applications and stapled them to invoices. If push came to shove, I had backups. Then I got a letter telling me I was #1 in sales of the CFNA credit card for all of the franchises in the whole United States. Not in dollar amount, but rather in new cards approved. Next month, same thing. For 6 months straight, I was #1 in sales in the nation. The amount of money coming in from the CFNA card sometimes was 70% of my total for the week. My eggs were all in one basket, but it was the right basket, or so it seemed to me. But something was not right. I had gotten not a word of recognition from the franchise. They had a monthly newsletter which normally would have announced such a thing. Every month their newsletter made similar such announcements like Joe Blow's sales go up after getting new sign, or Joe Blow adds oil change and increases car count. Also, they got their picture in the newsletter. Something was not right. I found out what it was a week later with a letter from CFNA. It was a regretfully worded letter saying they planned to honor their agreement to continue providing service to franchisees up to as long as possible, even though our corporate had decided to spin off their own credit card using another carrier. They had fired CFNA. Our franchise had decided to use Citibank, piggybacked on top of the people who had bought out NPC, Bank of America. It was a disaster. The transition was FUBAR. It took 6 months. We had to purchase new terminals. They required PC charge for checks. Nothing worked. Money would not go into the bank accounts. For weeks at a time, terminals were down. The whole upshot was they smelled money. CFNA's service came at a cost. Our franchise claimed we franchisees would receive higher approval rates and more sales on top of lower rates. Credit card rates charged to merchants are rather insignificant. They varied over the years, but went for a long time at 1.65% for Visa and MasterCard, 1.55% for Discover, American Express had the highest rate at 2.99, but they were set up more as a monthly charge, not a credit card, and they maintained a higher level of professionalism. The private label card was actually lower. They provided the highest level of customer service. Check guaranteeing services charge in the neighborhood of 1.25%, but they have a tight set of rules and do not actually cover each and every check. More on that later. It was not long after this occurred that I decided to part ways with the franchise. Enough is enough. They went from bad to worse yet to still yet worse. They decided to buy a chain of bankrupt oil change places, and I finally sold. Well, that was a reading of Chapter 11, Private Label Credit Cards. And this is Billy-Bubba's Dumbass Texas Muffler Shop. My name is Pop, and I have a whole bunch of videos on YouTube, not just reading from this, and I invite you to look at them if you enjoyed this. Thank you very much.